Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this video. Story 1. I've always loved the mountains. The quiet, the solitude, the sense that you've left the world and all its noise behind. So when I found the listing for the cabin, secluded and serene, it said, I booked it without hesitation. A week away from work, from people, from everything. When I arrived, it was just as perfect as the photos had promised. A cozy log cabin, nestled among towering pines, with a wraparound porch and an old stone fireplace. The air was crisp, tinged with the scent of pine needles and damp earth. Inside, the place felt like stepping into a postcard. Rustic furniture, a patchwork quilt on the bed, a bookshelf crammed with dog-eared novels. I spent the first day exploring the nearby trails, snapping photos of waterfalls and patches of wildflowers. That night, I built a fire in the hearth, poured myself a glass of wine, and sank into the plush armchair in the living room. I felt at peace for the first time in months. It was on the second night that I noticed the draft. I'd been walking through the living room when I felt it, a faint breath of cold air against my skin. It was strange, given that all the windows were shut tight, the door bolted. I stopped, standing still, and felt it again, a whisper of cold coming from somewhere nearby. At first, I told myself it was nothing. Old cabins like this have their quirks, after all. But as the night wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I found myself pacing the living room, running my hands along the walls, searching for the source of the draft. That's when I noticed it, a seam in the wood paneling, so faint it was almost invisible. I pressed my palm against it, and the panel gave way with a soft creak. The hidden door swung open, revealing a narrow, pitch-black passage. I stood there, frozen, staring into the darkness. Every instinct screamed at me to close the door and walk away. But curiosity is a funny thing. It tugs at you, even when you know better. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and stepped inside. The passage was cramped, the air thick with dust. It smelled like mildew and something else, something faintly metallic. The floorboards groaned under my weight as I moved forward, the beam of my flashlight trembling in my hand. At the end of the tunnel was a small room. My stomach turned as the light swept over its contents. A stained mattress shoved into the corner, a rusted lantern on the floor, and Polaroid pictures pinned to the walls. Dozens of them. I moved closer, my breath shallow, and began to examine the photos. They were of people, men, women, even children, all asleep. The backgrounds were different, but one thing was consistent. They all looked vulnerable, unaware, and then I saw it, a photo of me. It was from the previous night. I was sprawled in the armchair by the fire, my head tilted back, eyes closed. I staggered backward, all rising in my throat. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. Had someone been in a cabin with me, watching me while I slept? The sound of a creak behind me snapped me out of my thoughts. I spun around, my flashlight beam darting wildly, but the passage was empty. Still, I didn't wait to find out if I was alone. I turned and ran, my heart hammering in my chest. Back in the cabin, I grabbed my bag and car keys and bolted out the door. I didn't even bother to lock it behind me. The drive down the mountain was a blur of darkness and panic, my mind replaying the image of that photo over and over. I reported the listing to Airbnb as soon as I reached the safety of a motel in the nearest town. I explained everything: the hidden door, the room, the photos. They promised to investigate, but when I checked the listing the next day, it had already been taken down. I'll never know who was watching me or why, but sometimes late at night, I still feel that faint draft on my skin, and I can't help but wonder if I brought something back with me from that cabin. Story 2. The studio apartment was just as described: quaint, cozy, and conveniently located in the heart of the city. The host, Elise, had hundreds of five-star reviews on Airbnb. Words like attentive, kind, and above and beyond jumped out as I scrolled through her profile. I booked the place for a weekend getaway, needing a break from the monotony of work and the oppressive gray of my apartment walls. When I arrived, Elise greeted me at the door, her smile so wide it felt like it could crack. She looked younger than I expected, mid-30s maybe, with short, bobbed hair that framed her face like a porcelain doll. She wore a floral dress that swayed as she walked, the kind that seemed too perfect for a casual meet and greet. "Welcome, welcome," she said, her voice syrupy sweet. She grabbed my suitcase before I could protest and dragged it inside, pointing out every detail of the apartment. The Wi-Fi password was written in perfect calligraphy on a framed card by the TV. The fridge was stocked with complimentary drinks. Even the towels smelled like lavender. "You must try the cafe down the street," Elise gushed, clasping her hands together like she was sharing a secret. "They make the best pastries." "Oh, and the bookstore around the corner?" "Heaven, just heaven." Her enthusiasm was a bit much, but I chalked it up to her being one of those overly friendly people who love hosting. Still, something about her felt off, like an actor who forgot the scene she was in, but kept smiling anyway. After the tour, she lingered by the door, hesitating like she had more to say. When I thanked her again and gently nudged the door closed, she finally left. That night, I woke up to the sound of footsteps. The apartment was on the top floor of a 3-story building. No one lived above me. At first, I thought maybe I was dreaming, but the rhythmic creak of the ceiling was unmistakable. Slow, deliberate steps pacing back and forth. Grabbing my phone, I texted Elise. "Hey, is there anyone else staying here? I'm hearing footsteps above me." Her reply came almost instantly. "Oh, don't worry about that. It's just the old pipes. This building has a lot of character." "Old pipes?" Pipes didn't move in steady, deliberate patterns. Pipes didn't stop suddenly, like someone realizing they were being listened to. The next morning, I noticed small things out of place. My toiletries were no longer where I had left them. My toothbrush was wet, even though I hadn't used it yet. My suitcase, which I had left zipped shut, was slightly open, my clothes messily folded instead of the precise way I'd packed them. It was unsettling, but I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I'd been groggy when I unpacked. Maybe I'd forgotten to zip the suitcase all the way. Still, the unease lingered. That night, I decided to test my theory. I set up my phone on the dresser across from the bed, its camera pointed at the door. If anyone came in, I'd catch them on video. I barely slept, every creak and groan of the building making my pulse race. At one point, I thought I heard the doorknob rattle, but when I sat up and stared at the door, it was still. In the morning, I grabbed my phone and reviewed the footage. What I saw made my blood turn to ice. At 2:43 a.m., the door slowly opened. Elise stepped inside, her face unnervingly blank, like all the enthusiasm she'd shown earlier had drained away. She wasn't carrying anything, didn't seem to be looking for anything. She just stood there, staring at me as I slept. She stayed for nearly 5 minutes, unmoving, before silently backing out of the room and closing the door behind her. I didn't shower. I didn't eat. I didn't even pack properly. I threw my things into my suitcase, grabbed my phone, and bolted out of the apartment. I sat in my car, hands shaking, and called the police. When they arrived, Elise was gone. The apartment was spotless, like no one had ever been there. Her Airbnb profile disappeared the same day, as if she'd never existed. To this day, I wonder how many others she watched while they slept. How many others woke up to find their things slightly out of place, brushing it off as their own forgetfulness. And how many never realized anything was wrong at all. I don't use Airbnb anymore. No matter how many reviews a host has, no matter how perfect the place seems, I can't shake the feeling that someone's watching. Someone like Elise. Story 3. I booked the farmhouse because it looked like the kind of place that might help Mia and me reconnect. We'd been fighting more than usual, little things that piled up like dirty laundry, forgotten anniversaries, late nights at work, and the unspoken fear that maybe we weren't as happy as we pretended to be. The listing promised a vintage charm, a place where couples could escape the noise of the world and rediscover themselves. The photos were straight out of a storybook. Ivy climbing the walls, a wraparound porch, and a golden field stretching to the horizon. It seemed too perfect, but I figured the cracks would show up in person. When we arrived, the cracks weren't in the farmhouse. They were in the air. The place looked like the photos, but fell off. The wooden floors creaked too loudly. The furniture was too still, and the smell of must and damp would clung to us like an unwanted touch. Mia wrinkled her nose, but I put on a smile and said, "It's got character." She didn't reply. The guest book sat on the coffee table, a thick leather-bound thing that seemed older than the house itself. Its cover was scuffed and cracked, and the pages were yellowed, filled with entries from past guests. At first, they were cheerful little notes, "Such a charming place," and "We'll definitely come back next summer." They were written in looping cursive, some with doodles of hearts or little flowers in the margins. Then about halfway through, the tone shifted. One note said, "Don't leave food out overnight. It attracts them." Another read, "If you hear whispering, don't follow it. Just stay in your room." I chuckled nervously, showing the entries to Mia. "Looks like someone's got a dark sense of humor." She wasn't amused. Her eyes flicked to the hallway, where the shadows seemed deeper than they should have been. "Let's just get some sleep," she said. The first night was quiet, except for the creaks of the house settling. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, while Mia's soft breathing filled the room. The quiet wasn't comforting. It pressed down on me, heavy and unnatural. Around 3 a.m., I heard it, a faint whisper. It was so soft I thought I might have imagined it. But when I held my breath, it became clearer. Words I couldn't understand, slipping through the cracks in the walls. It sounded like it was coming from the hallway. I sat up, straining to hear more, but Mia grabbed my arm. Her grip was iron. "Don't," she whispered. Her face was pale, her eyes wide. "You hear it too?" I asked. She nodded. Her hand didn't leave my arm all night. The morning light didn't chase away the unease. If anything, it made it worse. The house looked brighter, but no less hollow. I tried to laugh it off, saying we were just tired and letting our imaginations run wild, but Mia wasn't buying it. She was jittery, constantly glancing over her shoulder. We decided to explore the property to shake off the nerves. The golden fields were as picturesque as the listing promised, but the farmhouse loomed in the distance, a dark blot on the landscape. When we returned, we found the guest book open on the coffee table. We hadn't left it that way. "What the hell?" Mia whispered. A new entry was scrawled on the page, written in jagged letters that didn't match the neat handwriting of the other notes. "Thanks for letting us stay. We'll leave soon." It was in my handwriting. My stomach dropped. I hadn't written it. I flipped the pages, but the ink was fresh, smudging slightly under my fingers. Mia was silent, her face a mask of fear. I tried to laugh, to rationalize. Maybe it's a prank, maybe the owners. But I couldn't finish the thought. I didn't believe it, and neither did Mia. That night, the whispers came back. This time, they weren't faint. They were louder, closer, slipping through the cracks of the door. Words I still couldn't understand, spoken by voices that didn't belong to anything human. Mia clung to me, trembling. "We need to leave," she hissed. "We will," I promised, though I wasn't sure we'd make it through the night. Around 4 a.m., the whispering stopped. A heavy silence filled the air, the kind that comes before a storm. Then came the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, moving down the hallway outside our room. I didn't open the door. We left at dawn, leaving our bags behind. The guest book was closed when we passed the coffee table, but I swear I felt its presence, as if it was watching us leave. We never reported the farmhouse. What would we say? That a book wrote in my handwriting? That shadows whispered our names? To this day, I can't explain what happened. All I know is that we weren't alone in that house, and whatever was there, it wanted us to leave,